Quando le venne affidata la peggiore classe con gli studenti più violenti della scuola, non si perdette neanche per un istante d'animo e nel giro di un solo anno riuscì a rovesciare tutti i pronostici contro ogni aspettativa possibile, rendendo questi ragazzi interessati allo studio, ma ancor di più consapevoli che la vita poteva offrire anche per loro delle grandi opportunità, delle grandi chance. Signori, per voi Erin Gruwell.
I am an ordinary teacher who had an extraordinary experience with 150 students, a journey of kids who were hopeless, kids who did not have a voice, and how they found themselves in a classroom. They found that voice, and these young people who were so angry, who were so downtrodden, were able to put down that fist, put down that gun, and pick up a pen. And by picking up a pen, they were able to write their story and rewrite their ending. But when 150 kids walked into my classroom at the age of 14, I quickly realized that they hated reading, they hated writing, they hated each other. And the only thing that brought them together was that they truly hated me, this perky, annoying English teacher wearing polka dots and pearls and this perceived white privilege. And in their mind, how was I supposed to help them survive? How was I supposed to help them get from point A to point B? That everyone has an odyssey. Everyone has a journey. So what I needed to do was to ask my students, tell me about your journey. Where do you come from? At that moment, understanding this journey and understanding this odyssey, I understood why it was so difficult for Darius to go home and to pick up a book and to find himself somewhere within the pages. When he didn't even know if he'd make it to his 16th birthday. When he didn't know if he'd be fed that evening. When he didn't know if his mom was going to come home. A story that could end in a jail cell. A story that could end in a small one-bedroom apartment. A story that could end in a funeral parlor. I asked my students to pick up a pen and to tell their story. Maria did not want to write her story down. In fact, for the first 2 weeks, she wrote, I hate Erin Gruwell, I hate Erin Gruwell, and if I wasn't on probation, I would probably shank her. But every day she would sit down and she would write these horrible letters to me about how much she hated school, how much she hated me, and how much she couldn't wait to go back to school. But on that fateful day when I asked my students to pick up a plastic champagne glass and a toast to change, I had no idea that this little girl would stand up and not talk about school or universities, but something far more fundamental. Maria Reyes picked up that plastic champagne glass and she simply said, I don't want to be pregnant by the time I turn 15 like my mama. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life behind bars like my daddy. And I don't want to be 6 feet under by the time I turn 18 like my cousin. I want to change. And when this little girl who was so tough said, I want to change, at that moment I realized she wasn't so tough. And in that moment of weakness, in that moment of being vulnerable and exposed in front of a room full of her so-called enemies, it gave every other kid this opportunity to stand up, pick up a plastic champagne glass, and to talk about change. They were tired of being told to act like a man when there was no man to show them or to guide them or to mentor. Young girls were tired of hearing their moms get their head bashed against the wall by a new boyfriend who just polished off a bottle of Jim Beam. And in that moment, as every kid picked up that plastic champagne glass and for the first time thought about picking up a pen and changing that cast of characters, writing their story. And so I gave my students books written by and for and about kids who came from real wars. Anne Frank, Elie Wiesel, who rode into Auschwitz in a cattle car, a young girl from Bosnia-Herzegovina. And each of these storytellers, each of these young people picked up a pen and changed their fate. That piece of paper became their confidant. That piece of paper liberated them and allowed them to use wings to fly. I started with 150 kids who weren't supposed to make it. Kids who came from jail, from gangs, from rehabilitation centers, kids who lived out on the streets, kids that nobody else wanted. kids who were invisible. And 4 years later, I watched 150 kids be the first in their family to graduate, the first in their family to go to college, the first in their families to change their lives. A profound question. Years later, those same kids who did not like reading and did not like writing became published authors, storytellers. And their book, this book called the Freedom Writer's Diary, became the #1 book in America that allowed these young people to change history. And maybe they're going to change history one kid at a time, one classroom at a time, one community at a time, because each and every one of those kids found their voice. And so I watch them every single day go out into the world and see kids who look like them and talk like them and come from a place that they come from and realize that maybe I too can change. Maybe we can change the world by changing education.